After 17 years, basically, of living in the valley, continuously living in the valley, taking a little break for about 3.5 years when we moved to Aransas Pass, I have come to the conclusion that the valley, the Rio Grande Valley, is basically made of two kinds of people. You're going to have those who love this place and cannot go away. I've met people who had scholarships to go and play or to go and study abroad, other places, other states, and they refuse because they want to stay in the valley. They cannot see themselves away from the valley. And all I got to say to that is, power to them and bless you. But then you have the other group of people who they are just waiting for the next opportunity to go back to wherever they came from or to get away from the valley. I have never met kind of the in-between type of person that is kind of I don't know, it can go either way. You either love it or you hated the valley. That's what I found. That may be your experience. Hopefully you're not in the latter part of the group, that you're just waiting for the Lord to open the doors so you can live this place. But here's what I want to tell you. I want to tell you because I went through this weekend and I was reminded of it. A couple of months ago, I was asked by a mutual friend to come and do a blessing / ceremony at a quinceañera. And quinceañeras is one of the distinctives of the valley. So if you love the valley and you are a valley person, that implies that you are either currently going to weekend parties 53 weekends of the year. I mean, it's like every single weekend there's a party going on. Something is happening. So I walked into this place a couple of months ago, and I had the opportunity, which by the way, just so you'll know where I'm coming from with this deal. I love weddings, I love quinceañeras, I love parties. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love them. And when people invite me, I love the fact that some of these people, most of these people, they're not church people. So the implication is that when they invite me to do this, they invite me into a context which is basically a ballroom. And it's filled with people. And I typically ask them, I said, hey, would you mind not putting my participation at the beginning of the deal because people in the valley typically don't make it on time. So I want to wait until people actually arrive, and then they give me about 15, 20 minutes, and I do what I need to do, whether it's a wedding or whatever the case may be, and I openly share the gospel. Well, again, I did this about a month and a half ago or so, and a week after the event, somebody just texted me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm so-and-so. You don't know me, but I was at so-and-so quinceañera, and I saw what you did, and I would like for you to do that for my daughter, if you don't mind. I replied and I said, I would love to. Let's talk. So we got into details. Here's the bottom line. Friday was the day. And I walked into this ballroom not knowing anybody. Like, I knew the lady via text. That was it. We texted for a couple of times, and then, you know, I basically said yes, and I walk into the place, and the place is packed. And there's a lot of people there. And I met her personally. I met the father of the quinceañera personally, and then I met the beautiful quinceañera. And I got about a 15-minute window to just share the gospel. I got up there, and unapologetically, I went straight into what the scripture teaches, and I basically spoke of Joshua. And I basically said, when the book of Joshua begins, it begins on the third person. Joshua starts speaking on the third person. You know what I mean by third person, right? And I said, to me, this is totally new because within the last 5, 6 years, social media has taught us to speak on third person. Like Facebook and Twitter, people speak on third person. So it's kind of familiar in that regard. So I'm thinking to myself, social media is not really that new because Joshua is an ancient book. And I went into the explanation how Joshua, when he wrote about himself, he basically sees himself, if you read Joshua 1:1, he sees himself as Moses' servant. And the point of the deal was, no, when you look at Joshua, Joshua saw himself as Moses' servant, even though Moses was gone, he was dead, but God saw Joshua as a leader. And I was just challenging this young lady to say, you may see yourself as something and whatever description you see of yourself. But let me tell you what God says in you. That's what truly matters. And then I went on into this whole gospel presentation, and it was very, very exciting. Now, here's what came out of this whole deal on Friday, and I drove away from this experience, and suddenly just dawned, just hit me as I'm driving away from this place. On the first stoplight, I went by myself, so I'm just sitting there in my vehicle thinking, and I said, oh my God. I said, this, what I just did, walking into a place as a minister and speaking the gospel into a group of people, which was a bunch of group of people, openly and unapologetically about Jesus of Nazareth, and specifically walking into a place where I have never met anybody, might be some of the last times that I get to do this. And here's why. This is the reason. Not because I don't want to do it. I love to do it. And if anybody invites me, I'll do it again. Because we live in a time and age where I believe ministers will get in legal problems by refusing to do some of these events. Once you get into some of the craziness of our sexual moral revolution. Are you tracking on my statement? And I'm bringing this up because what you're going to see in front of you is the very well-known program on TLC called Sister Wives. I don't know if you're familiar with this program, but this is a program on TLC that literally reflects the polygamous relationship of a man with 4 wives. Legally, this man is married to one of them. I don't know which one. I guess the blonde. All look blonde to me. Anyways, is married to one of them legally, and the other 3 are, watch this, watch the language, they are joined spiritually. Now, here's a quick, just listen for a second before you jump into conclusions, and just listen for a second. This is the culture that we lived in, and even though in the state of Utah, which they're from, in the state of Utah, it's still illegal for you to have multiple wives, still illegal. And most of the states in the United States, is still illegal. Once we have opened the door legally for same-sex marriages, once we don't have a problem morally with men and women having multiple children from multiple venues, from multiple experiences, we are still the nation from a legal aspect that we pull the brakes and we push it from the issue once you want to get it into this marriage deal. In other words, we don't have a problem with a man having multiple relationships with multiple women as long as they don't get married. So I believe, because this is happening already, just the same way that bakery people, flower arrangement people, right now they are in trouble, some of them with the law, because when they had a same-sex marriage couple walking to their places asking for their services for the wedding ceremony, and they refused to have a cake, make a cake for a wedding experience with 2 men on top of the cake, instead of a black-looking dude with a white-looking gal, now you have 2 black-looking dressing dudes on those cakes. And people across the nation, they have pulled up and said, I just can't participate with, I refuse to provide service for those things, and they have gotten in trouble. So in my mind thinking, I'm driving away from this deal, and again, I just walked into the deal on Friday with a lot of assumptions, cultural and moral assumptions. Are you following me on this? Because I never met these people, and probably I need to be more careful with this deal. Because I walk into this place, again, just assuming this is a typical quinceañera where the parents is a man and a woman. I assume that. Now, through God's mercy, it was. So yeah, I got to preach the gospel. But here's what I'm going to tell you, just from a parental perspective. I have a 12-year-old boy that I love with all my heart. My son is special to me. And for the last 7 months or 8 months, I have seen. Have you heard the saying that it takes one to know one? Yeah. I have seen the trends, the landmarks, the seal of seen my son develop in the passion to serve Jesus. And I know, it's a matter of time, he's been called to ministry. So in my mind, here's what I want you to think about for a second. In my mind, I am very convinced, and I don't want to sound negative, I don't want to sound critical towards this, but I believe my son's generation is going to have to deal with this more directly. Are you tracking on this? This is who we are as a nation, and this is where we're heading towards. Undeniable. So when my son started leading the Church of Christ, and other young men and women are stepping up to the plate to lead the movement of Jesus and continue the legacy of the gospel, this is the reality. Now, here's the crazy thing for me, because bottom line, as I said before, I am not in shock that this is happening. It's wrong, and it's against the Bible. I don't care what everybody says. Can we just agree on that one? But here is what I believe. You need to just chill and pull the brakes up and just kind of relax. This is expected because people without God, they know no difference. The problem is when you see these scenarios with people who call themselves Christians. That's where the tragedy comes into place. That's when it doesn't make any sense on what is happening in our world today. Now, I'm bringing this up to you. This is why. And again, this creates a very low-key tone in our service. And I'm not going to apologize because here's what I'm going for the next few minutes. Today we're speaking on the issue of being created in the image of God. And when I see people, Christians in churches, having a problem with this, my heart's desire this morning is for us to obviously oppose these practices. But ultimately, I want us to oppose in the same manner what we are doing as a nation with our finances. And this is not a stewardship, sermon or talk, but all that I'm trying to tell you is that most of the time, listen, most of the time, we divorce morality or ethics, or in this case, sexuality, that we may oppose polygamy, we may oppose, same-sex marriages, we may oppose fornication, sex before marriage, we may oppose adultery, sex outside of marriage, but we have no problem worshiping the God of money, we have no problem worshiping self-indulgence, we have no problem being the nation who is at the verge of literally getting to what is called the tipping point financially. And even though this is a very small graphic, because I couldn't make it any bigger, here is what the census of the Bureau of Census tells us from this year. A third of our nation, and that's millions of people, are living under federal or government aid, government help. Whether it's through food stamps, whether it's through, you name it, all the systems that you and I are familiar with. So what you see in there is basically the breakdown of this issue. Now, here is the point of the story. We are at the place that many European countries have gone through. That when you get to that place that there is no turn around, there is no way to reverse the system, we will collapse. Is everybody following me on this? And here's a tragedy of the deed. Please listen to me. That we may have issues with same-sex marriage and polygamy, but as Christians, we have no issues with this, what is happening, when we are so irresponsible with the resources that God has placed us. And I believe the foundation of this has to do with the scriptures, with a worldview that reflects what God said about the family. Because when I show you this picture, obviously this is a mockery, a deformed, literally a twisted image of what the family is supposed to be. But many times we excuse ourselves as families why we're doing this. So let me just give you a quick example. If anybody, and I don't know if there is anybody, but I'm going to assume there is somebody in the nation of this, in our beautiful nation, who is utilizing or taking advantage of all this government aid and help, they will be receiving, as we speak, up to $60,000 a year. That implies that if you're living under this system and abusing the system, you are making way more than a school teacher is making right now. something wrong with our picture? Is there any wonder why we're in trouble? Now, here's the biblical worldview before you either walk away from this deal or put me as a hero, because I don't want neither one to. I'm just conveying and trying to create some sense of awareness on this deal. The Bible describes, and we spoke about this last week from the book of Deuteronomy, that when you look at the pilgrimage from Egypt into the Promised Land, Moses spoke last week through chapter 6 of Deuteronomy, and basically is reviewing or reshaping this whole relationship between this new generation of basically slaves, of the sons of the slaves that left Egypt and are about to enter the Promised Land. And Moses went through this whole chapter 6 last week, explaining the whole dynamics of who God is and how you were created for community. Now, here's what I want you to understand, because this is the principle that I believe is the solution to this crazy deal that we have going on. Here's the principle. When they walked for 40 years in the wilderness, God provided what is called aid. And the meaning of aid is nothing else but basically saying, if you do not come to the rescue of this person or people for that matter, which is the case of Exodus, or the experience of the Exodus, these people will die. I believe there is people in our country, in our communities, some of these people are friends of ours, some of these people are relatives of ours, that if we do not come to the rescue, they will literally die. Are you tracking on this? There is people who legitimately need the aid. And God, through 40 years, provided, just go down the list, manna from heaven, clothing, column of fire at night, a cloud during the day. Are you following me? See, if God were to provide those things, these people will be no people. But the moment they enter into the Promised Land, you know what happened to all those things? What happened to the aid? It became help. And the help means that now that you are in the land, now that you have arrived to the destination, you're going to work the soil. You're going to cultivate. You're going to work. And now, because now you are a settled or settlemented, community. So, aid and help. I believe what we should describe financially for our country is that millions of people are getting aid from the government when they're supposed to get, come on, say the word, help. Now, before you crucify our government, before you mock our leaders, let me just be very honest. And again, I don't know if you can agree with me on this one, but that's okay if you don't. I do believe that the government is doing what we are doing at home. And I'm going to put it to you very simple. On the issue of parenting, the challenge of parenting right now is that many of us have or are doing parenting in a way that we do not know the difference between providing aid to our children when what they need is help. So what happens is you have a generation of men and women, which specifically in the men area, we have what is called extended adolescence. We have a bunch of men that look like men that behave like boys. Because parents have literally overprotected this generation of men and women. And what happens is we don't know sometimes the difference between aid and help. See, aid and help in parenting is like money in a sense of just how you perceive that. Nobody sees greed in the mirror. We call ourselves go-getters. Right? We don't see ourselves as greedy. We just say, I'm just a go-getter. I just work really hard. No, you're greedy, man. How much is enough? How much is enough? So the same principle happens in here. And all that I'm asking you to do is that let's take these principles and experience them family-wise, family in the nucleus of the intimacy of men and women, children, and then let's take it, obviously, community-wise. Once we forsake the biblical principle of aid and help, and we do not know the difference. See, in our culture, when you present this picture on a parental context, people will translate this as negligence.